Stay afraid, but do it anyway. This quote from my lifelong hero, Carrie Fisher, reminds us that fear is innate when facing the unknown, but despite this, we are compelled to persist. Today, I invite you to join me on a pilgrimage, a journey through shared experiences of loss, grief, uncertainty, and ultimately healing. We are here to discuss not only moving forward after grieving, but also to understand the capacity of our own strength. Each and every one of us has moments where we have stepped into the unknown, whether it's voluntary or forced by circumstances out of our control. In my life, unknowns have come in many forms, from pausing my education and my career in track and field in 2020 to work in a hospital during the pandemic, to switching careers, to working in sustainable textiles, and to moving to Michigan on a whim to finish my education. Each leap required courage when facing uncertainty, but the most transformative experience that I have endured was facing bereavement with the death of my father and learning to live life after loss. My journey into the unknown of grief began long before my final days. But before I get into that, I want to talk about grief. The American Psychological Association defines grief as the anguish experienced after significant loss. Grieving a loss often causes anxiety, confusion, longing, physical distress, fear of the future, and most importantly, not all loss is the same. Musician Paul Simon says there must be 50 ways to leave your lover, but there's got to be 1,000,000 ways to lose a loved one. Loss can stem from addiction, relocation, estrangement, illness, the onset of a disability, and much, much more. Grief can also arise from regret over something lost, remorse for past actions, or sorrow over misfortune. The common unifier amongst loss is the resulting disarray with life, something I am intimately familiar with. In 2012, my dad endured a catastrophic car crash, which left him with a traumatic brain injury, along with physical impairments. At the time of the accident, I was 11, my brother was 9, and the injuries our dad sustained guaranteed that he could no longer be our paternal caregiver. While this was occurring, our paternal family cut all ties with us. So, because my parents were divorced, we had no say in his care, and we were denied hospital visitation, and that resulted in years of legal battling for visitation rights. My brother and I had both lost our father and our paternal family, but they weren't dead. This type of unresolved grief is known as ambiguous loss, which the National Institute of Health defines as something that defies closure and prevents the resolution of grief. After the court granted us visitation, watching my father struggle to regain even a fraction of his cognitive, physical, speech capabilities in hospitals, rehab centers, and eventually at home, caused deep unresolved pain and lasting confusion. I was also inherently frustrated. I wanted my dad back, but I didn't want him back like that. I wanted the person who raised me, not the person that this was, not this near stranger who struggled to string together words, who required mobility devices, constant care, and couldn't care for me. It was gutting knowing that there was nothing that I could do to fix that situation. Just as we were beginning to adjust to this new reality, rebuild our connection, and resolve our ambiguous grief, everything changed again when he started to develop seizures, which led to the discovery of terminal cancer growing in his brain in December of 2015. The knowledge of his impending death brought mixed emotions. On the one hand, he wasn't going to be suffering anymore, and we could resolve some of our grief, and on the other hand, we were losing our dad altogether. After the tumor was resected, he underwent chemotherapy and radiation, showing minimal changes other than hair loss and a bit of exhaustion. But visits became much more somber with the knowledge that our time was now limited. That summer, we shared his last good days after the treatment stopped. Despite his deficits and illness, he was still very paternal, very protective, and still curious, asking about going fishing, about my love life, and reminding me that there was no boy on earth good enough for me. He's right about that, by the way. I'm a total catch. For the first time since his brain injury, things had almost felt normal. But with August, there was a steep decline in his health, and in September, his presence began to fade much further. Visits became much more frequent. each goodbye begging the question if this one was going to be the last. Our final visit was on a Wednesday, coincidentally the day that our dad had custody of us during the week after my parents' divorce. Kind of ironic. He had finally lost all control of bodily movement, the ability to communicate, eat, and respond. His condition no longer resembled a meaningful quality of life. We knew that this was the final visit. This was it. I told him it was okay to let go, that we were going to be okay, and that I was going to take care of everything from there. I was 16 at the time. When leaving him, I felt so much distress that I felt like I was going to vomit. With the exception of my dad's wake and funeral, that was arguably the most painful experience of my entire life. 2 days later, early on October 7th, 2016, before the sun had risen, his heart stopped. In his final moments, I really hope that he found the peace that he so much deserved to reclaim. I stand before you and share this with you not because I want your pity, but because I want you to understand that you are not alone in your experience with grief. You are capable of growing through it. I'm here to challenge you to turn your reflection into action by naming your grief or acknowledging the grieving of someone that you know. Grief is not a problem to solve, but a journey to walk together. And this is where our first steps begin. Grief can be unbelievably painful for a multitude of reasons. It hurts because our love is going unanswered and unmet, and because our life has changed without our permission, and our hearts, bodies, and minds are just trying their best to keep up. The American Brain Foundation shows that grief can alter everything from memory and decision-making to the functionality of our heart and immune system. Our bodies react to the loss of connection, and avoiding grief stemming from it can actually prolong the period of acute physical and emotional distress, which can lead to complicated grief, according to the National Institute of Health. I mention these findings to highlight that grieving a loss is not only a universal human experience, but also to acknowledge that grief isn't just in your head. It is rooted within our biology. Unfortunately, grief does not have an expiration date. I can't just stand up here and pretend like my grief doesn't follow me around. The concept of moving on or getting over it is a complete and total myth. Grief is an experience that evolves with us, weaves itself into the tapestry of our lives, and changes who we are. The 7 stages of grief, including shock, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, testing, and acceptance, happen at their own pace, but the physical and emotional symptoms of grief usually resolve in 1 to 2 years. However, 2 to 3% of the population experiences complicated or complex grief, which is defined by a prolonged sorrow lasting longer than 6 months in children and 12 months in adults. If you've experienced this and that statistic makes you feel alone, you shouldn't, because there's at least one other person in the room who's feeling that, and that person is me. My grief over my dad has included unresolved grief from ambiguous loss, anticipatory grief knowing that he was going to lose his battle with cancer, chronic grief from persistent loss, delayed grief because I feared vulnerability and didn't want to or didn't know how to show that I was hurting. I was so consumed by the idea that acknowledging this pain made me weak that I tried avoiding grief through constant distractions with school, athletics, and constant socializing, but avoidance wasn't healing me. It was consuming my thoughts, straining my relationships, hurting my academic and athletic performances, and burning me out. I wish that I could tell you guys that I had a grand epiphany, a total aha moment, but in reality, it was just from burning out after years of fighting denial, and I had to throw in the towel. Grief 1, Holly 0. From the prolonged avoidance, I had distorted grief, which caused lingering and intense anger, denial, sorrow, depression, guilt, and a feeling of detachment from everybody around me. I felt silly for having this massive Achilles heel after this situation had concluded years prior. In reality, I just had very unrealistic expectations for myself, and I was frustrated that I couldn't just get over it. It took years, but with time, acceptance of support from my loved ones, and a little bit of self-compassion, most of those feelings have subsided. It is important to understand that even if you've experienced complicated grief before, this does not bar you from grieving healthily within the future. Last October, my childhood dog and my best friend Shady died after 16 and a half years of unconditional love. She was the ultimate source of comfort and one of the last tethers to my childhood and a time that my dad was still present. If you have never had a pet, recent studies show that the loss of one can actually be as painful as losing a human family member. So when I was totally inconsolable, it was not an overreaction. Knowing that our time together had ceased had me constantly weeping, but at the same time, I felt immensely lucky to have experienced a bond so strong that it completely shattered my heart. Time transformed my grief into remembrance, and I'm grateful to have gone through it because it allowed me to process my feelings and carry her memory with love, not being trapped by the loss that I was, like I was with my dad. Grief won, Holly won. Grieving is inconvenient and uncomfortable. It demands to be felt. In allowing ourselves to grieve, we honor not only ourselves, but the ones we've lost, by confronting our response to the situation and allowing our bodies and minds to process it in a healthy way. While healing, it is common for triggers, which are the sudden reminders of a situation, person, or loss, to cause intense emotional responses and resurgence of grief. The most common triggers are birthdays, special occasions, and special events in music. Triggers don't always produce harmful responses. They can also bring about feelings of acceptance, joy, gratitude, but not always. My dad was a really big Jimmy Buffett guy, and I totally credit him and my mom with my excellent taste in music. But hearing a riff from Margaritaville might make my day, or it might make me sob. Seeing a young father play with his daughter might fill me with solace, or it might leave me melancholy for weeks. Emotional triggers are simple reminders of our connection, and the best way to deal with them is to ride that emotional wave. It may feel like you're going 2 steps forward and 2 steps back, spinning in circles or regressing, but at the end of the day, every experience that you have and every reaction you have to your grief is normal. Healing from grief is not about forgetting. It's about learning to carry the pain with a little more ease. Just like raising a child, it takes a village to recover from grief. My village includes my mom, stepdad, stepbrother, stepsister, brother, my maternal and step-grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, my best friend, and my teammates from track and field and rugby. Whether it's loved ones, support groups, or a therapist, leaning on others can keep you steady when you feel like you're sinking. Naming your grief, sharing your story, practicing your vulnerability, mindfulness, journaling, prayer, quiet reflection, that can help ease the burden. Loss has a funny way of making people behave like glow sticks. We have to bend and break a little bit before we can shine. If you're feeling all consumed, broken, hopeless, or physically distressed, there is absolutely no shame in going to seek medical or psychiatric help. Grief is exhausting. Look at me being healthy. We have to show ourselves some leniency in order to recover. The healing process begins when we stop fighting and allowing ourselves mercy. What I can do, watching someone grieve can be really difficult, especially if you have not dealt with it yourself. Being supportive doesn't require grand gestures, it just requires your presence. Showing up, listening, respecting that grief has no timeline, understanding that responses vary across cultures, and avoiding cliches are really the only requirements. Validating someone's feelings by acknowledging that their situation is not only unfortunate, but dreadful, expressing your condolences or offering your assistance can let them know that they aren't alone. Your compassion can be vital in helping people. The last aspect of grieving that I want to touch on is remembrance. Remembering someone that you've lost is not about clinging to the pain. It's about honoring their memory and the connection you shared. My dad's favorite book, Tuesdays with Morrie, contains the quote that death ends a life, not a relationship. Your relationship to a person or situation does not cease once it ends. Just because something has ended does not mean that it stops shaping us, and there is no correct or incorrect way to honor that. Our existence, the things we carry and hold on to and move forward with, are the echoes of the continued presence that they've made on our lives. And so here's where we stand. Grief is not a burden to be experienced alone, but a shared journey down a winding road that goes on indefinitely. We must address our pain and our fears and understand that healing not only requires courage, but community. I would like to challenge you all to now take the next step. Tell your story, reach out to someone hurting, celebrate someone you've lost, build your village. Remember that grieving is but a testament to our humanity. It is the response to a lifetime of love. It does not make us weak. We should all be so fortunate to experience a connection so significant that it causes earth-shaking disruption when it ceases. When the time comes to navigate the unknown terrain of grief, know that you are capable of making it through. As Carrie Fisher wisely said, stay afraid, but do it anyway. In taking the next step forward together, we can turn our most tremendous pain into our greatest strength and transform our goodbyes into a gift. Thank you.